Hi everybody, this is Thomas from the Udemy courses, and today we are going to talk about why we should not store Ether in an exchange and why we should better store it on a computer offline. This is what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about storing Ether and why it's not like a bank account and why mining Ether are actually not generating any Ether. We are going to talk about private and public keys, and of course, the pro and cons of storing Ether in an exchange, storing Ether on your computer, and storing Ether on a hardware wallet. Now, exchanges are a lot out there. For example, Kraken or Poloniex or Coinbase. And if you have an Ether in your exchange, then it's really good if you are exchanging something, if you're trading Ether for Bitcoin or Ether for any tokens and so on. The bad thing is the exchange can go bankrupt anytime, or it can just close the business. So basically you have to trust them that they're going to be online tomorrow and you can withdraw your Ethers again. And this is how Ethers are really stored. Ethers are always stored on the whole blockchain. They are not stored in an address or in an account. And the blockchain always knows how much an address can spend. It's not like when you receive Ether on an address that they are in there. It's just when you send a new transaction, then the blockchain knows, yes, you're allowed to spend so many Ethers that you want to send. As we all know, the amount of Ether is finite, like with Bitcoin, right? And at some point, everything gets mined. The thing is, mining just doesn't generate any Ether. It's everybody on the blockchain agrees that the mining address can spend more Ether as soon as the block is mined. And that's kind of the difference between a bank account, right? It's stored on the blockchain ledger, so it's stored distributed. Let's say an address 123 wants to send 1 Ether to 345. So the address 0x123 and so on, maybe make something up. But for this example, 123 sends 1 Ether to 345. And the address 123 starts a new transaction. And in order to send this 1 Ether, the transaction has to be valid. And once the consensus of all the nodes in the whole Ethereum network is reached that the address 123 can now spend 1 Ether less, then 345 can automatically spend 1 Ether more, and that's saved on the blockchain directly. So again, there are no Ethers really stored in an address. It's just on the blockchain safe that an address is allowed to spend a certain amount of Ether. Here's the thing with private keys, public keys, and addresses. So you know your private keys are extremely important. And you also should probably protect them with a password, just in case you lose them and somebody else finds them. The public keys can be generated out of a private key. So the public key can be derived from a private key. But it's not possible the other way around. That's why the public key has this name. It can be known in public because you can never make a private key out of it. And an Ethereum address is somehow derived from the public key. And under some circumstances, you can also generate the public key out of the address, more or less. But just keep in mind, the private key is the most important part of the whole chain here. With the private key, you can send and sign a valid transaction, and only with the private key. You cannot do this with the public key or your Ethereum address. So that means the private key can access the Ether attached to an address. Here's the difference between an exchange versus a blockchain. Now, an exchange is like a bank. It stores the Ether centralized. When you are depositing any Ether, then the exchange will increase your Ether balance. And when you withdraw money again from the exchange, so when you get your Ether out, your balance at the exchange decreases. But the crucial part here is that the exchange itself stores your balance and your Ether. And from the point of view from the blockchain, your Ether that you see as a balance on the exchange actually belong to the exchange because they are in control. And here's how that is done. First, you're in control of your Ether. So you have some Ether on an address and you want to exchange them. You want to put them on Coinbase or on Kraken. And of course, you want to increase your Ether balance on the exchange. So you have to send the Ether to the exchange. So the first step is send the money to the exchange. And the exchange receives your Ether. So from there on, the exchange is in control of your Ether. Your balance on the exchange increases and you can withdraw them again as long as the exchange exists and plays by their own rules. In a more simple example, you send money to the exchange, your balance goes up. You withdraw money from the exchange, your balance goes down. But the exchange owns your money. Here are the pros and cons. If you are a trader and you do a lot of trades, of course it's better to keep your money in the exchange because it's very fast to access. Some of the exchanges, they can be trusted. And some of them are even backed by government laws and government rules. But on the other hand, if you store your funds or your Ether, your Bitcoin, your tokens and so on an exchange, you don't own them anymore. You're not in control. If the exchange goes down, out of business, they just shut down, they take the money and run, you have nothing left. So basically you trust a third party. And if you store your Ether in an exchange, it's pretty much the opposite of what Ethereum was made for, because then it's stored centralized. If you're, on the other hand, really attaching your Ether to an account where you have the private key on your computer, that's great because you're in control, right? And you have to take care of private key backups and you have to make sure that the private keys are password protected, just in case your computer gets hacked, you lose them, you copy them somewhere, right? Your notebook has a crash and you have to send it into warranty and the support rep makes a copy of your hard drive and finds your private keys. If they have no password, everybody has access to your account as soon as they have the private key. So either make sure your computer doesn't get hacked or have additional measures to secure them. On the other hand, if you want to store your Ether even more securely, then you always have the option to store them on a hardware wallet. And there is different ones out there. And the purpose of this video is not to show you how that's done, but you can have a look at Trezor, Ledger, or BitLox. Those are all hardware wallets. And they all follow the so-called Bitcoin Improvement Protocol 32. That is a seed phrase can restore the wallet just in case it's lost. You just have the seed phrase and you have all your accounts back. So that's pretty convenient. And it's great because, you know, with a hardware wallet, it's basically stored nowhere and it cannot be hacked except you give someone access to your hardware wallet and the password. So here's your takeaway from this video. The Ether in an exchange, they are not your Ether. It's like storing them in a bank. You should store your Ether, if possible, in a hardware wallet, and please keep your private keys safe. Next up, check out my courses on Udemy, have a look in the description text, and I see you in the next videos.